they tend to use a substance called inositol.
I did so much fake cocaine in Wolf of Wall Street, I got bronchitis for 3 weeks. I had to be hospitalized.
Seriously?
Yeah.
The trouble with it is that it also has a slight laxative effect.
Oh, wow. I love where this is going.
Hello and welcome to another edition of The Rest is Entertainment with me, Marina Hyde.
And me, Richard Osman. Hi, Marina.
How are you? We're apart.
For the first time ever, we're apart. I'm filming House of Games, or I was filming House of Games yesterday. So as YouTube viewers will be able to see, I'm in gritty Manchester with a brick wall behind me. It's very urban here.
It's not our preference to be apart, but we're making it work and we're very happy to do so.
I like that you say we're making it work. We haven't actually started yet. It might be a disaster. I mean, thus far, it's going brilliantly.
Yeah, I've heard you. I mean, what more do you want?
Yep.
I think it's working. Now, what are we going to talk about?
I am hearing every second word you're saying to me, which is absolutely perfect.
If anything, too much. We are going to start by talking about Kate, the Princess of Wales, Kate Middleton, the various names, who on Friday evening, after an absolute frenzy of speculation on social media, but I have to say also traditional media, announced that she was receiving preventative chemotherapy for cancer. Before this kind of pretty bombshell announcement on Friday evening, let's forget that she had gone into hospital for 2 weeks and the Kensington Palace had said she won't be back until after Easter. She doesn't want to talk about it, but she's going to stay in hospital for 2 weeks. So whatever even the original health issue was significant and serious enough. But people have got themselves into a complete frenzy. There were masses of articles published every day. Even if you're looking at, say, one title, if you're looking at Mail Online and the Daily Mail, they have published masses and masses of articles every day. And one of the things that they do, one of those old newspaper tricks is if you feel like you can't quite say the things yourself that you see are being said on social media, you say, there's a huge social media storm, or American journalists are doing this or that. And what you're doing is kind of pointing in the direction of it. But really, what I think always comes across is their kind of annoyance that they weren't able to go further and write more speculation of their own. And you get these sort of stories about complaints about the palace's competence and comms strategy, which is, there's a sort of rule in politics, it's never the comms. If you're talking about the comms, you're not really talking about it. You fail to understand the issue. And people saying, but they haven't given enough information. They've given you all the information that she wanted to give you. And because that wasn't enough, and because you're annoyed about it and you feel like you're owed more, you're going to create all these other things. Say, look at there's an American feeding frenzy. There's a social media feeding frenzy. These are the techniques of titles who want to be able to report more or want to be able to speculate more. And they push the situation to such a point that they feed into the social media speculation.
When you say they're frustrated that they can't say more, is the frustration that they have information they're not allowed to print and they want to? Or is the frustration even more frustrating for them? They simply don't know what the story is, which is the worst thing if you're a journalist.
I think it's a bit of both. They know some of the story, and they do know aspects of the story that have not been reported. And in many cases, they may have leads on what they think might be the case. But mainly what they want to do is not hugely distinguishable from what people on social media want to do, which is get involved in the drama, drive the drama, feel part of it, really.
Yeah.
I'm just going to look at the Mail because it's a sort of useful title, because it probably produces the most coverage of it because its online offering is so huge. So you have someone like the columnist, someone like Sarah Vine, who was banging on about the Mother's Day photograph, saying, why wasn't the ring on? The reason for that doesn't bear thinking about. I'll see it, but bears writing about, does it? Then, having said all that, she was saying there's only one way to put an end to it: come clean about what's really going on, or risk drowning in a quagmire of their own making.
Says the quagmire.
And then Sarah Vine has actually apologised to some extent in a column, but there are plenty of other male columnists who are saying, why can't we hear how, Amanda Patel was saying, why can't we hear how Kate is getting on? And then after the announcement said, how dreadful to think that even as she was undergoing chemotherapy, the online haters persisted in taunting her by peddling their loathsome conspiracy theories. No wonder she and William circled the wagons around their young family. So you've got a situation that, to me, in lots of ways reminds me of Diana and stories about Diana. You could see it on television as the bulletins broke through the night that she'd been involved in a car crash and eventually that she hadn't survived it. The timing of it meant that the Sunday newspapers came out with the columns that were originally going to be written, and everybody wrote about Princess Diana at the time. And there were lots of the sort of, female Sunday columnists who'd given her a real pasting for whatever it was. And because of the print times, these things had already gone to press and had been distributed and were bought on the morning. So it reminds me of that. Have you ever heard that expression, no snowflake in an avalanche ever feels responsible?
Well, I always think opinions are like litter, aren't they? You think, well, my one little sweet wrapper doesn't matter. And then suddenly you turn around, and there's a huge pile of trash behind you. And you think, well, you're equally culpable as everybody else.
And I realise that this podcast in itself is talking about the issue, so you're all part of it, and it's all...
I think, though, that it's okay for us to have an opinion, you and me. It's just everyone else I'm getting tired of.
Yeah.
But that's the problem with opinions, isn't it? Everyone enjoys their own. It's like karaoke, isn't it? It's always fun to do your bit, but, you don't want to hear other people.
I do think that to be part of the frenzy of the drama is so compelling and addictive that people have lost all sight of reason, because... and certainly of their humanity, because the thing we did know is that she had been in hospital for 2 weeks, which is really long to be in hospital for. It's really reasonable to assume that this person has had serious surgery, whatever you think. And that conspiracist mindset set in completely. And it was, newspaper columns were written in a conspiracist mindset. All sorts of people who, this is such a sort of patronising phrase, isn't it? Should know better, but really should know better, speculated in a way that was pure conspiracism.
Yeah, and listen, everyone's got a slightly different ingredient, but it's all going into the same soup, is the truth. Yeah. Everyone's coming from different angles. Everyone's got different reasons for doing it. Some people are being paid to do it. Some people are doing it because they've got nothing else to say that day. But it all goes to the same place. It's whenever you watch someone on TV getting a hard time, and you'll get 1,000 people saying exactly the same thing. And that's the problem, because all of those 1,000 people are just single individuals going, oh, I'm annoyed with this woman I've just seen on TV. So they'll send out a tweet. And then you go, okay, now we've got 1,000 of these, because it's, snowflake and an avalanche is the perfect metaphor for it. But we've all become, if you think back to Blair's government and Alistair Campbell and that idea of instant rebuttal and that idea of you get your spin in immediately. You have to always have the counter narrative immediately. And now everybody does that. Every single human being is a spin doctor. Every single person is an instant rebuttal unit. Every single person is trying to spin their version of a story. And they're all doing it as individuals, but we live in a culture, and all of those opinions all swirling around at the same time. It's really tiring. You can't hear individual voices, and you have to remember that when there's a human being at the heart of it, then that person is hearing it all too. My view is this: you should be allowed by law 5 opinions a year, okay? So publicly, you can state 5 opinions. So think very, very, very carefully if you want to have an opinion about the thing that's just happened, because you're going to have 5. And everyone's got 5, so there's still loads of opinions, plenty of stuff going on. And obviously, if something gets a lot of opinions, we're like, oh, this is a big story, because a lot of people are using one of their opinions today. But if we're only allowed 5, then think about the things that would be very important to you. But most people would have used them all by January the 3rd.
Well, we wouldn't have much of a podcast, Richard, and I certainly wouldn't be a newspaper opinion columnist.
Once again, I think we're immune.
I see. It's the other people.
But that's the problem, isn't it? That's the problem. Is we all have the right to think whatever we want. We all have the right to say whatever we want. And everyone doing it at the same time. The problem now is we get to hear so many more opinions.
But one thing I do think is quite interesting is that she has been bullied into doing this. She has been bullied by people into doing this. But it does remind me, even before we had this age of social media, that is what happened with the Queen after the death of Diana. Again, there were all these headlines in the newspapers, show us you care, all of these sort of things. They wanted the Queen to leave Balmoral and come to London to, console them about the death of a woman that they didn't know, and to leave that woman's 2 children in order to do that. People are deranged, and they have perhaps always been deranged. And a lot of those people, by the way, bought all the newspapers and bought them up voraciously that printed the most intrusive paparazzi pictures of Princess Diana during her life. And they were the market. And they then, rather as they do now, could say, well, I wasn't part of all that speculation last couple of weeks about Kate. It's a very similar thing. But everybody needs a villain, and the papers also need another villain. And in the this time they've said it's social media or the American press or whatever it may be. Back then, I remember talking to people at The Sun, and they said you couldn't believe the relief when it was discovered that the driver's blood alcohol level was over the limit, because then it was his fault. But until then, they felt she was being chased. Clearly, she was being chased through the tunnel, and they were the market for those type of photos. When they had this get out, really, that he had been drunk and then he's the villain, and the relief was almost a sort of physical sensation. People could feel it sort of sweeping through the newsrooms, because then there was someone else to blame. And I do sometimes feel that's the case with social media, that there is not as much clear blue water between if you're publishing 10, 20, sometimes 30 online articles a day about this situation, then are you really so different? Not that many people tweet 30 times a day, even if they're saying something dreadful or whatever. And also, they're irrelevant. They're just ordinary people. You should have a better responsibility. And really, you also know that people are prone in our country, but I suppose that's the market, to these kind of weird hysterias about the royal family. And we live in a kind of siloed culture or in a polarised culture. And there are a lot of people who are like either they're Team Harry and Meghan or their Team William and Kate. And it has become to some extent like a sort of sport thing. And so you know what you're feeding into when you publish all that stuff. And the one thing that you can be absolutely sure of on all sides is that nobody thought her feelings mattered. She said she didn't want to discuss it, and that was the least relevant possible thing. They always feel they are owed a certain amount from the royal family.
Yeah.
And if they don't get it, then they will do something to say, here we are. And that's really why The Sun published that video last week where she'd gone to a farm shop, Kate and William, and people say it wasn't her, all sort of complete, genuine conspiracy nonsense. But they published that because they felt like you are not giving us enough information. And it is a sort of thing to say, you see what we can do? We can do this every day if you don't tell us more. And that, I think, would probably have been a sign for the palace that the kind of British presses will hold the line, not that they necessarily do, was breaking down, and they're going to have to do something about it. They say we are owed coverage. You're required to do a certain amount. And if you don't, then, oh, look what's happened. Social media will talk in this way, but it's not. What they believe is that there is a deal. They have a number of reporters on the Royal Beat. They get a lot of favourable coverage for turning up to the ribbon cuttings and the openings of this and that. And really what they say is that they feel like they are owed a certain amount of personal information in return for that.
Well, the wrinkle in it is they sort of are owed it, in that, the royal family, keeps its place by the consent of the British public, and the media are a sort of filter through which we see that. And, so they have been in that dance for many, many years, haven't they? The media and the royal family, and both understand what they need from other. It's like if you're an F1 driver, you have to do your post-race interview, otherwise you don't get paid. Yeah. When you sign up, that's your contract. That's where your money comes from, is the media. And so it's moments like this, I guess, when that dance sort of goes awry a little bit, when we really start noticing it, when one side tries to flex its muscles and the other side tries to flex its muscles back.
There's a history to this particular niggle. They always feel that the Waleses don't give them enough. All the royal photographers are annoyed that Kate takes lots of their private, there'll be a Mother's Day picture, there'll be a birthday picture.
Yeah.
The royal photographers have, written trenchant think pieces about this, that, we should be allowed to take the pictures. She hasn't put any light on her face. She's not a great photographer. We should be allowed to do this. I felt it was always going to happen after the death of the Queen, that they were moving into really uncertain times. And you get a lot of coverage at the coronation, like, oh, here we are, a new golden age has been ushered in. And I thought, well, were you watching the same thing? Because I'm terribly sorry, and my sympathies to him for being ill as well. But what I saw at the coronation was a very, very old man, and there was a sort of sense of a gerontocratic country in some ways. Princess Margaret said when the Queen was crowned back in 1953, it was a phoenix time, and it was. They were coming. She was a very young Queen. They were coming out of austerity. There was a sense of possibility, of hope, of all sorts of things. I didn't feel that. I felt I was watching an old man, take office at such a late stage in life. And as they say, my sympathies, but the things that were written about the coronation, I thought were absolute nonsense to a large extent. And the idea that everything, a new golden age had been ushered in and everything was all right again. I have never felt that was even the medium-term view. It may have been the short-term view on the day, but it isn't the medium-term view, and I definitely don't think it's the long-term view. I think they're on very difficult tides, and I felt that we live in a great age of uncertainty in our country anyway, and I think that it's no surprise in some ways that this is reflecting it.
And I think, on just a final note, which is in the same way that if you're a West Ham fan talking about David Moyes, it's all you'll talk about and you're obsessed and lots of people will talk to you about it. Almost nobody is talking about this, is the truth. And we're talking about it as we are. We're talking about what does it mean to us as a country. But at the heart of it, we all know is someone we wish very, very well. And, Charles and Kate both recovering from cancer, and we wish them well, as we wish well families up and down the country going through the same thing. It's fascinating for us to talk about because it tells us a lot about power in our country. It tells us an awful lot about media in our country and what it does. But it's worth reflecting for everybody involved that it's just a series of human beings at the heart of it.
Yes. And like a lot of conspiracies, it really hurts. It really hurts lots of human beings at the heart of it.
Now, let's talk about another long-running British soap opera, James Bond, and the succession thereof. It's been reported that Aaron Taylor-Johnson might be our next James Bond, but this is another British sport. It's been nearly 20 years since the last Bond was announced. It feels like every year it's always in the news. It feels like an incredible publicity machine for the Bond franchise, this idea of who's taking over.
No, not every year, every week. Nothing is as good as getting itself talked about as this franchise. It's unbelievable. I think Daniel Craig originally said in 2016, I'm not going to do it anymore. And in fact, he did actually go back and do more. But it's 8 years of pure speculation the entire time. It's the mark of doing well in any form of British acting. You haven't done well in your show unless, even though like James Norton did brilliantly in like Happy Valley and all sorts of things like that, people are like, when someone says to you, now how about you're being the next James Bond? It's because for some reason we have to say to all our British actors, this could be you. You could be, what do you think about the chat? And they have to sit there in an interview and answer it. And there are so many.
James Bond, Tom Hiddleston, what's the scoop? What's going on? Oh, listen to that.
Google your name. Sometimes it comes up as James Bond, by the way. Have you heard about this rumour?
No. No.
I think I'm too old for that, man. I can't be running around in cars and ladies and martinis. Who wants to do that? That sounds terrible.
And by the way, they would all be great. That's the beauty. It's like having co-hosts on Have I Got News For You. It's a positive when someone loses their job and someone else takes it because you can take it into whole new worlds, like Doctor Who as well. Suddenly it becomes a completely different show. I think it's what, I think James Norton would be a great James Bond, or I think Idris would have been a great James Bond as well. But it just gets you talking about Bond and what it is and what it represents. And the Bond of the books, the Fleming books, is a very particular character. But essentially over the years, since the 60s, Bond has come to represent so many different things. Every time a new actor comes in, it sort of represents where Britain is as a culture. And that's a great thing. But it'd be a terrifying job to take. It's a sort of job that it'd be nice to be, like the England manager, it'd be nice to be linked to it, but you wouldn't want to do it.
I do think that thing about it being a sort of bellwether, there are certain things in British life that always used to be seen as sort of bellwether. Like if they were doing well and were good, then in some ways we were good. And things like the M&S underwear department, like if M&S is doing well, everyone's like, yeah, no, it's working. Otherwise it's like, why is M&S the Man United back four? Not great currently. So, but there's certain things like that are regarded as like almost institutions in themselves. And Bond is definitely one of those. I do think you're right that what it means to be Bond changes with the times. I definitely thought with Daniel Craig, the amount he talked about the toll of the role and how difficult it was being Bond and having to get into shape. And this was something about masculinity in this particular era that all his trainers would go on the interview circuit and say, yeah, I was able to add 10 inches to his thighs by this or that. I was thinking, gosh, this is getting quite hard for men out there, isn't it? There's something different about his particular thing. No one works as hard as me. And you thought, in the end, really, mate, you've sort of just got to have sex with some beautiful women in like a nice hotel and drive a hot car. It's not agony. I mean, I don't think it's a particularly agonising role in lots of ways, but there was a lot of angst that he brought to it. So I would quite like the next person. I don't want to say that they should be able to, as Roger Moore does in Octopussy, turn to a snake and say hiss off, although I'd like it.
Hiss off.
I mean, he was a sensational Bond.
I mean, I definitely think it's time for a fat Bond. That would take a lot of pressure off British men, wouldn't it? That I feel for Daniel Craig. It is that thing from sort of when he took over, which is 2006, something like that. That a man suddenly had to be a certain thing. Everything got very Men's Health, and as well as being a terrific actor, which he is, he suddenly had to be super buff, and that's. I mean, that honestly must be quite tiring to do that for 15 years. To stay in that sort of shape, and when he got Benoit Blanc in the Glass Onion films, he must have thought, "Oh, at last, I can just do acting again. I can be in these things that people love. People can know me for something else, and I don't have to be up at 4:30 in the morning for leg day."
It's always leg day, but this is like Marvel movies where it's such an unbelievably punishing schedule. The fitness is 75% of the day, and then there's this tiny little bit where you're saying your lines in front of a camera, but mostly it's leg day.
Yeah, I mean, it wouldn't have happened in Timothy Dalton's day, that's for sure. No. But funnily enough, Connery, who was the first Bond, or the first Bond of the official Eon films, he was a bodybuilder. He's a Scottish bodybuilder, super fit, cast because he was unbelievably handsome. And, you know, it's always been a sort of exemplar of manhood, hasn't it? And Lazenby, who took over from him, I mean, he was a car salesman in Finchley, George Lazenby, and then started modelling, became the best paid model in Britain. And then Cubby Broccoli said, well, this guy's handsome enough for me. And so he got the gig as well. And so, you know, it's never been, let's give this to some schlup down the pub. You know, it's always been pretty much who's the suavest, most handsome man in Britain. You know, Pierce Brosnan was insanely handsome, almost impossible to be more. The only person more handsome than Pierce Brosnan when he became James Bond is Pierce Brosnan now. It's the only person who can beat it. So, you know, I get it. And when Craig got the job, I think everyone was furious because he didn't have exactly those looks. I think there were two headlines. One called him James Blonde and one called him James Bland. And I think Cubby Broccoli usually does a pretty good job in choosing Bonds. And I thought Daniel Craig was a terrific Bond. Took it in a new direction, took it probably closer to the Fleming books than anyone else had. Had that sort of cold-eyed thing that Bond had been missing for a little while.
Well, that was Barbara Broccoli. She's obviously she herself taken off on the franchise after her father, and I think she runs it with her half-brother, actually. But
that's right, Michael G. Wilson, yeah.
They do a terrific job. As we say, like, it is something that is in the conversation. Obviously, there are many years between each movie because they take a long time to make. They're a big, big action franchise. They're kind of fascinating how enormous they are, really. But constantly between those release dates, people are talking about who will be the next Bond, when this next Bond retires, will this person now be in the queue? It's unbelievable. It is the most kind of perpetuating form of gossip that I can think of in the whole of movies. As it's far bigger than like Superman and Batman and all those sort of things. They kind of die away and then they say, oh, we're rebooting it and it's going to be darker and grittier or whatever it is, one of those franchises. But this one just keeps itself on the boil forever. I mean, fair play to them.
Yeah, but also one of the interesting things is they keep the same team behind the scenes. So as you say, Barbara Broccoli and Michael G. Wilson, and you know, just a lot of the crew. It's a lot of the same people all the time. You know, the scripts are written by similar people. So actually, they're taking care of Bond. They're taking care of who Bond is and the story and the narrative and where that's going. And it's just the shop front they're changing. It's like a lovely sort of Selfridges Christmas shop front where they go, look at this shiny new thing we have with us. But there's behind the scenes. They know what they're doing with that franchise behind the scenes. Can I ask you the sort of question that you hate?
Yeah.
Who's the best Bond?
Who's the best Bond? Well, I like Bond as a humorous role, so I love it when Roger Moore says hiss off to the snake. And because I quite like it that it doesn't take itself that seriously. So I would... they've all been good. I do like the taking the piss element of Bond, and I would quite like that to go back again. But Daniel Craig has been a fantastic James Bond. Obviously, Connery's a brilliant Bond. I mean, I suppose it would be between those three. I can't even choose because they all bring something so different to it. But I do the humorlessness. I'm not a huge fan of it being totally humorless because it's such a silly thing in general, really. And I think that we can have a laugh again, can't we?
But I think occasionally it has to be a bit serious. I think it's been okay to have Daniel Craig doing what Daniel Craig did. Yeah, the next one, you wouldn't want to go darker.
No, not darker and grittier.
Next time. You would think that Aaron Taylor Johnson, you think, would take it in an interesting direction, a slightly more, maybe a slightly lighter, more fun direction.
Do you think he would? Yeah, I'm not convinced by him as a sort of lighter and fun player. Not that I don't think he could do it, but I don't really see that as his screen persona. I think he is a bit dark and gritty, isn't he? And troubled and what have you. But maybe that's the role.
George Lazenby, who only did it once, and then his agent persuaded him never to do it again because he said Bond is not going to last the 70s. You mustn't get yourself shackled to this franchise. One of the all-time great agents there. But I was reading Diana Rigg said about George Lazenby when she'd worked with him. She said, I can no longer cater for his obsession with himself. She said, and then Desmond Llewellyn, who is that wonderful old actor who played Q, said, I draw a veil over the chap.
Amazing.
How devastating would that be if Desmond Llewellyn said, Marina Hyde, I'm afraid I draw a veil over her.
I can well imagine him saying such a thing about me, but yes, and I'm sure I would deserve it. But yeah, that's a bit finita la musica, isn't it?
And so the question is it going to be Aaron Taylor Johnson? And the way that this rumour mill works is sort of twofold. Is occasionally the Bond people will kind of put out a name because they're trying to entice that person. And occasionally an actor's PR will put out their name saying, oh, I think our client would be a very good Bond. Now, in the second instance, when the PR puts it out, it never works. Essentially, if it ever comes from someone's PR, you know that they've sat round, they've had a discussion that said, why don't we say James Norton? I'm not saying that's what happened with him.
Yeah.
Why don't we say that you're in the running to play the next Bond? And they'll go, okay. And they go, by the way, if we say that, you are definitely not going to get the part of James Bond. That we know for definite. But what it does mean is we elevate you into the pantheon of young, hot, great British actors. And so that's the deal they're making there. They can kind of go, let's say you're in the running for Bond, because essentially that says something to other producers in Hollywood and other producers in the UK to say this is the guy that you should hire. But Aaron Taylor Johnson seems to have come from Eon, the Bond organisation.
Yes, it does. But they have also been on slight fishing expeditions. There's a lot of, like, we would love Christopher Nolan, of course, to direct one of our movies.
Good luck. He's directing this episode of the podcast, isn't he? Because we're in two different places.
Yes.
We had to give it to a new director, so Nolan is in doing this.
It will actually, the whole thing will unfold backwards as well, which will make it artistic as opposed to
he's drinking some tomato soup just in the corner there. Hey, he's shy. He won't say hi.
Can't you incept him into saying hi?
Oh, yeah. I'm going to incept you into saying, he's fallen asleep. That's good news.
Oh, yeah, it's good. It's great news from Nolan. Now, are we now going to move on to talking about Donald Trump?
We've done Bond. We've done Kate. Let's talk about Trump. Yes, so Trump. I mean, firstly, he's going to win the election. I think I can't see a way in which he's not going to. But one of the things that stands in his way is the fact that he owes $500 million in a civil fraud case in New York, which he has to pay back. And he's sending out mixed signals in that his camp are saying he can't pay you that. And he is sending a message saying, I have $500 million in my bank that I can spend. You think, all right, Don, I'm not sure you do. So, he could bankrupt himself. Reddit, the social media site, had its IPO last week, and it was very successful IPO, and the shares really, really rallied, and it's sort of valued at about 10 billion. But it's a big site, Reddit, with an awful lot of users and an awful lot of history. Now, Trump's company, which is Trump Media and Technology Group, which essentially is just Truth Social, his alternative to Twitter. And by the way, Trump Media and Technology Group was set up by two former contestants on The Apprentice US. Imagine that. So he has this group and it owns Truth Social. Truth Social makes no money.
It's got 860,000 active users, which is like so absolutely nothing. It's not even apparently in the top 100 downloaded social media apps in the Apple Store. Yeah. So not the top 100. So it's a nothing.
Yeah,
and
it might as well be zero. It's the only social media platform that Trump uses. Trump no longer tweets or anything like that. In fact, I think he's got a clause that says any public pronouncement must be made on Truth Social. And they've got a 6-hour exclusive window before he's allowed to say anything anywhere else. So it's very much his sort of
But that's
playground.
The crucial thing, because you think how much Musk so wants that one user to come back to the platform. We should say he was banned in the wake of the January the 6th insurrection and for allegedly fostering it on Twitter. And once Musk took over, Elon Musk, he was allowed technically back onto the platform. His account is reactivated and he could post if he wants to, but he doesn't. Now, for Musk, who is obviously in quite a lot of trouble at Twitter, it would be terrific if in the run-up to the leadership of the free world presidential election, this guy came back on. And don't forget, he basically ran the world off Twitter last time he was president. So for him, for that one user to come back is crucial. I'm amazed he's been able to be self-controlled enough not to come back onto it, because he has huge amounts of followers on Twitter and he gets the dopamine that he clearly thrives on. But he has disciplined himself into only posting on Truth Social, as you say.
But I think the reason he's disciplined himself, I mean, there's one thing that focuses the mind for Trump, and that's money. So he owes $500 million. Where on earth is he going to get that from? So they're launching the Trump Media and Technology Group, okay? They're floating it. There's a company called Digital World Acquisition Group, which is a shell company, which is going to merge with this Trump company, and suddenly it goes public. So
everything about it smells terrible, doesn't it? It's a really complicated shell company transaction. It's like, yeah, of course.
You'll be shocked to learn some Russian money involved.
I can't believe it.
But this company, Digital World Acquisition Group, is for a couple of years, they've said this is what we're going to do. So it's been on the table for a long time. And in the same way with the GameStop thing, where people started buying shares in something just so it kept going up and up and up, and all the hedge funds stopped losing money, a lot of Trump supporters have started investing in this shell company as a way of giving money to Donald Trump. And, and it's seen as a patriotic thing to do, to buy these shares. And so the price of that company has been pumped up so much before this float this week that at the current levels, if they were to float next week, Trump's stake would be worth $3 billion. $3 billion for a company that doesn't really do very much.
And the whole thing's supposedly worth $6 billion because he's got a 50% stake or whatever it is. I mean, once again, I feel like I don't really understand money. You're going to have to explain to me how something that is can be. I suppose it's all predicated on the idea that he will become president of the United States, and then it is suddenly going to be worth a lot of money. So it's a sort of speculation. But it's crazy that something with that few active users could be valued at $6 billion.
Yeah. How much would Richard Osman's House of Games be worth? I wonder. That's $2 million every day. If
you were going to be the president of the United States, presumably more.
Well, do you know what? I might do. But if that's the money involved, I might do that.
If that's what it takes to actually earn some proper cash, then why not?
But yeah, I can see a big valuation if it suddenly becomes the only place where the leader of the free world talks, okay? I can sort of get that. But all these people who pump the money into this shell company who are, supporting Trump and, wanting to make money. There's something in this merger, in the documents in this merger, that say that Trump cannot dump his stock immediately. He has to wait 6 months before he dumps this stock. Okay, so if it's worth $3 billion when it's floated, he can't do anything about that for 6 months, unless there's a little codicil in that merger thing that says unless the board say that Trump can do that. And who is he appointing to the board? Donald Trump Jr., there's Linda McMahon. There's essentially all his old cronies from 4 years ago and from his businesses around the world. So the moment that this floats, the board will, of course, say, oh, Trump can get rid of his shares. He cashes out. Obviously, the second a founder cashes out in their shares after an IPO, the price collapses because it says the founder doesn't believe in this company, so why should we? So he will cash in. He'll be able to pay off that $500 million like nothing, and every single small investor who put their money into this shell company is going to lose the lot. I mean, that's exactly what's going to happen. I mean, it's an insane pyramid scheme as so often in this, but that idea where you think he's going to owe so much money to so many people for being found guilty of fraudulent activities, there's no way he can raise this money. And you think, oh, he seems to have raised it off a social media site that nobody uses.
We'll check in on it again next week if it has floated.
Yes, well, I'm buying shares.
Yeah, of course. Why not? I'm dumping them just 3 minutes before he does.
Yeah, exactly.
If you're watching this now on YouTube, we're going to go straight into our questions episode.
Can I start with a mea culpa, some any other business? And Colin Kelly says, In regards to Richard's passing comment that Hulk Hogan was the original name attached to the George Foreman grill, it appears that unfortunately Richard has fallen for one of the Hulkster's notorious lies. Other falsehoods include the wrestler-director Darren Aronofsky offered him the lead role multiple times. Hogan said he turned it down as he didn't deserve it. Aronofsky has said Hogan was never even considered. That he partied with John Belushi after WrestleMania in 1986. John Belushi died in 1982. Hogan, listen, that's okay. You're allowed to lie, but he got me. He got me, Marina. I'll tell you what.
You can't bend time.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, it would have been different in the ring.
Would have been.
Yeah, he was always scared to face me. Can I ask you a question, Marina, please? Mary says, I've been binge-watching the full back catalogue of Call The Midwife on iPlayer, and it's got me wondering, where are they getting their supply of newborn babies from? Do they get paid? How do they source them? Do they spray them with red goo, Mary asked, to give them that newborn look?
The sourcing of newborn babies for Call the Midwife is a big thing because they need a huge number of them per series and they have to be newborns because of the nature of the show. And there are specialist talent agencies that deal with this, but there's one particular one which is called JAM 2000 and they really, I think, provide so many TV babies and TV newborns. Now, to be a TV newborn, in our country, you can start working as long as you've got the paperwork within a few hours of your birth, which is quite interesting. In America, I think you have to wait 15 days. I was speaking to someone about this. But you know that thing that people tell you, the camera adds 10 pounds? This is even true for babies.
No way.
You know, what they want is small newborns because otherwise the camera apparently adds quite a lot of pounds even to a baby that probably weighs a lot less than 10 pounds. So they look for sort of 2-day-olds, 4-day-olds. That's where a lot of the babies in Call the Midwife are. And what they want is, the agencies particularly because they think it's helpful, is twins, because then they are normally smaller. And also twins is great because you get to have double work. They can only work for 15 minutes at a time, the babies. And they're the biggest divas. The babies, like, everything gets ready in the scene. They rehearse with something called a jelly baby, which is a silicone model of a baby. So the actual real-life baby goes in at the very last minute, does 15 minutes work, a bit like sort of Liz Taylor in the heyday, and then goes away. And there's a chaperone always on set to check that the mother and the baby are not being exploited in any way. The woman who runs the agency, she said that, you know, sometimes you've got to get a baby and it's a really good baby, but then that will just be the day that it has a meltdown and there's nothing you can do about it. It will just have a complete meltdown on set. They now have robot babies.
No way.
Animatronic babies obviously are great because they can work as long as you like and they don't have any labour laws protecting them. But you do need a crew to operate them. They're really expensive. You are seeing more robot babies, but your production is going to have a lot of money because you've got a crew to operate them. They're expensive and most productions can't afford this, so they go with real newborns. But you need a performance license, so you can't just take your newborn along to the set. And apparently a lot of people do run it right in to Call the Midwife saying, I'm about to have a baby. I really want it to be featured in Call the Midwife. And they have to say, look, I'm really sorry, but we can't really fit in with your schedule because you don't know when it's coming. We have to have babies that will fit in with our schedule. But the woman who runs this agency for newborn babies says she does actually, if she sees pregnant people in the street, give them her card.
No way.
Because she needs babies all the time. So yes.
I mean, that's a sort of a weird job, isn't it? But you know,
is.
That's a job that sounds dodgy, but you go, actually, I think it's okay. Years and years ago, I worked on a sitcom for Channel 4 called Boys Unlimited, and there was a scene
about the band.
About the band, yeah. And there was a scene in a national childbirth NCT class with pregnant women, and then there was a scene when a baby is born, and the baby. Maybe it was different back then because we just had the receptionist at Hattrick, which was the production company, who just had a baby, Sue Gosby, and she brought in her little baby Mitchell, and he played the baby. Terrifying to think he must be 25 years old now. But I remember in the NCT class, I've got various people I knew and various people other people knew who were pregnant who came in and played that. So when you're an extra, you get paid a certain amount, a daily rate. But what I hadn't realised was if you are a pregnant extra, you're a speciality extra. And they got paid a fortune. I mean,
Really?
It was amazing. It was great. Just they sat around. It's a nice, fun day. And yeah, they got like a grand each or something just for sitting there because they were pregnant.
Which would have been much more than the base rate. Yes. I didn't know that. That's interesting.
Yeah, there you go.
Okay. This is definitely a question from you, from Sam Taylor. I recall seeing a tweet that said that the majority of the pre-recorded laugh tracks we hear in American sitcoms were recorded in the 1950s, meaning that we are, in fact, somewhat morbidly hearing the laughs of a room full of dead people. Is this true, or would the laugh tracks have been re-recorded using better quality microphones, etc.?
Oh, goodness me. I often read people talk about canned laughter and say they've ruined this with canned laughter, but almost always, if you're hearing laughter on a sitcom or a panel show or anything like that, it's the laughter that was in the room at the time. I've certainly never worked on a show where you've sort of got a library of laughter and put it on. So if you do a show like Have I Got News For You or 8 Out of 10 Cats, something like that, you've got the entire audio recording of the audience, all of whom are mic'd up, and you'll go through the edit and someone will do a joke and you'll get the laugh off that joke. And it will always be that specific laugh. Now, sometimes someone will do a joke, it'll get a laugh, and someone else will have said something else which you want to get rid of in the edit, or something, there'll just be an extraneous noise. If that happens, you have to take the beginning of the laugh that really happened. You then have a catalogue of laughs from the same show, always from the same show, and you will put a tail on that laugh so that you can go into the edit for the next thing that's on screen. Because you can't always use a whole laugh, because if you're not using the thing that happened directly afterwards as well, then you'll lose the tail of that laugh.
But you can only use native laughs from that show. That's hilarious.
Certainly, I've never been in a room or an edit where they've used a laugh from a different show, ever. Sometimes if you're recording a panel show or a game show or something like that, someone will say something quite quietly that was very, very funny. The audience didn't really pick it up. But in the edit, you see it, you go, oh my God, that was brilliant. I didn't even notice that happening. And you want to put it in. It is very peculiar for everybody if you put in something that's very, very funny and nobody laughs. So on that occasion, you might go, do you know what? That person got this laugh for a very similar joke. Let's put that laugh on. But you are trying as much as possible to show what really happened in the room and what the audience really, really responded to. Interestingly, since COVID, and now there are no audiences, for most game shows anyway, there are no audiences. And so you want to have a sort of atmosphere track for that sort of thing. And so the cheat that will happen there is, if you have no audience at all, it sounds haunting. Yeah. And you'll sit in an edit and just go, people will not be able to handle this. Britain will be plunged into crisis if they have to watch this sort of, the silence around this. Oh
no, it was like the football in the pandemic. I always put the crowd noise on. Everyone, only animals watched it without.
Always.
Don't write in.
Yeah, but always with the crowd noise. And so in there, you'll have the floor managers and you have the crew, and they'll applaud where they would naturally applaud. They'll laugh where they naturally laugh, and you will boost that in the edit. You will absolutely just go, that's the guide, and you won't boost it a huge amount. You're not suddenly having huge guffaws, but you just go, Let's have a little smattering of applause when that smattering of the applause happened in the studio. I see a few things now that are clearly recorded without an audience, which put laughs on, and you just think, I don't know. Well, firstly, I don't know where you got that laugh from, and secondly, it's certainly not a normal response to the thing that was just said on camera. So I think since COVID, there's more sort of shenanigans going on. But by and large, in terms of those panel shows and in terms of British sitcoms, certainly the laugh you're hearing is the laugh that was in the studio at the time. If it can be the exact laugh, it always is. If you've had to do an edit, then you might hear the start of one laugh and the end of another. Here's one thing, whenever you're in a studio, every single time you record, there's someone who at the end of like a laugh or a laugh applause will wait an extra second and do an extra clap, because they're thinking, oh my God, this is brilliant. That means I'm going to hear my clap. When I watch this on telly, I'm going to hear it. And of course, you'll never hear it because you're never going to leave that in. All it does, if you've ever been in a studio audience and done a late clap, then all it means is you've made the editor's job so much harder, because at the end of every single laugh applause, they've got to chop that out. They've then got to rebuild the beginning of the next bit. So all you're doing there is making someone's life much, much harder, but you're never going to hear it.
Have a heart, late clappers. Don't do it anymore.
Oh, another sort of filming behind the scenes question here, Marina, from Andy Bywater. Andy asks, what is substituted for drugs in scenes? If an actor is doing 10 takes of snorting prop cocaine up their nose, I expect that has to burn after the first couple, no matter what substance it is that they're snorting.
That is a very good question, and I have asked some props people about this. What they tend to use is a substance called inositol, which is actually real drug dealers sometimes cut pure cocaine with it, but it's a kind of vitamin B complex. Now, the trouble with it is that it also has a slight laxative effect.
Oh, wow.
Now,
I love where this is going. This is like the babies all over again.
Yeah, well, Ray Liotta and Debbie Mazar, do you remember she plays Sandy, his mistress in Goodfellas, and they really run the coke business together. And she said it had a real laxative effect, and he said it really cleans you out. So a lot of those scenes in Goodfellas where it's getting quite close to the end and the helicopter circling the house, basically.
Stop with those fucking drugs. They're making your mind into mush. You hear me? Take them back.
You do actually snort this substance, but the props department said what they want is you to get as little as possible in your nose or whatever it is, because it does obviously have an effect, as you say, Andy. So they put Vaseline inside the rolled note or the straw or whatever you're using to snort it, so that as much as possible sticks to the inside and doesn't go up your nose. Clever. However, sometimes Jonah Hill was actually hospitalised on The Wolf of Wall Street.
I did so much fake cocaine in Wolf of Wall Street, I got bronchitis for 3 weeks. I had to be hospitalized. Yeah.
What is fake cocaine?
It's vitamin powder. We were just literally doing fake coke for like 7 months every day.
So the message to kids is don't even do fake drugs.
Don't even do fake drugs on a multi-million dollar production, because you could still end up in hospital with bronchitis. This is a good one from CJ Cordes. What makes a celebrity, and can you leapfrog celebrity and go straight to national treasure status?
That is, CJ Cordes is a good name, by the way. Yes, celebrity. I think we used to know what a celebrity was. Funnily enough, on House of Games yesterday, we had a question about the 2012 Olympics, people who won gold medals. And Phil Daniels was on. And Phil Daniels was saying, like, in the 80s, we only ever won like one or two. You know, so in the 80s, the only people winning gold medals were Duncan Goodhue and Daley Thompson. So everyone knew who they were immediately. So you immediately become a celebrity. These days, you know, we had I think there's about 40 gold medalists from that Olympics. So even winning an Olympic gold medal doesn't automatically make you a celebrity now. I think that in terms of, funny enough, I'll think about House of Games because that's what we're just doing. And you think about the lineups of people that are coming on and you look through them and you think, okay, so the other day we had Michaela Strachan on. So Michaela Strachan has been famous since the 90s. Yeah. Everyone has seen her on something, whether you know her from Hitman and Her or from, Springwatch. She's done enough things for enough years that everybody knows Michaela Strachan. So Michaela Strachan is an absolute sort of solid gold celebrity. So if she's on House of Games, you think, great, we've got someone who everybody knows. If you've got a younger stand-up, then I would essentially go down the list of stand-ups, and I've seen them all, and if I think someone's brilliant, I say book them on the show. Now, that person is not a celebrity necessarily. That person probably will become a celebrity because they're very funny and they'll do lots more telly. But so long as I've got two people on there, each show that my mum knows, then I can have two people that my daughter knows. So celebrity means different things to different people.
Yes, it means a different thing to me, I would say. When I think about it, because I don't have a popular quiz show to produce, I think of celebrity as...
Not yet.
Not yet, but I think Clive James said that Elizabeth Taylor was the first celebrity. Even though she was obviously very good at something, into acting, she was more famous for being famous than she was for the thing that had got her famous in the first place. I often think that anyone can attain a form of celebrity nowadays, but something that's very different. I'm not sure that you leapfrog celebrity and go straight to national treasure status, or perhaps you do, but something that I think is very different is a star. Now, right. There are a lot of celebrities, but there are an incredibly small number of stars. And there are very few people. There are people who are in movies now and who can command many, many millions of dollars per picture. I would still not call them a star. I don't think of them as a movie star. And some people will still say to you, Tom Cruise is the last movie star. He's the last real serious movie star. I actually think that when I saw Barbie, I remember thinking, there's something about Margot Robbie. She is a star. There's something about her. She is a star. And there are other people who can helm really quite big franchises who I don't think are stars in the sense that I would understand the idea of stardom, which I think is something an incredibly small number of people actually have.
Oh, this is good. Okay, Ryan Gosling.
Yes, he's a star, but he's still, to some extent for me, a B-movie actor.
So Ryan Gosling star.
I know. But you know, he's not Gary Cooper, is he? He's not John Wayne. He's not Tom Cruise. He's not the absolute kind of the top of the firmament. No, he isn't. He's on a rung or two below that for definite.
He's a minor star. Julia Roberts.
Oh, star without any question. Obviously, star.
Jennifer Aniston.
She's a television star for me, even though she makes huge amounts of money in movies, as we discussed, but mainly on streaming services. But yeah, she'll always be an unbelievably mega TV star for me, but I don't think of her as a movie star.
So she's more like Michaela Strachan for you.
Yeah, she's on a par with. Everyone's seen her in something.
So that's fascinating, the Hollywood thing. I always think on a slightly more parochial English level, who you can book on TV shows and who you can't.
Yeah.
So an interesting sort of ladder is, by and large, you can't book someone on a TV show if they haven't been booked on another TV show before, right? That's the difficult rule of television. You know, if you've got to guess, if you're Last Leg or if you're Have I Got News For You or any of these shows, if someone hasn't already been on something, it's very hard to get the channel to agree to them to be on your show. The lovely thing about House of Games is we can book whoever we want. Because we've got the same people on for 5 days, and because I always make sure there's somebody there who's a proper kind of someone that everyone knows, we have a lot of freedom to book people who wouldn't be booked on other things and book people who haven't done other shows.
So the end of 5 days with you have incubated a new TV celebrity.
Yeah, exactly that.
What a service.
Yeah, sometimes you put people on and you see how much people love them and you think, well, this is great. And immediately afterwards, I used to work for the company make Would I Lie to You? And often after a week on House of Games, I'll say, look, we had this new young comic on, or we had a guy called Mike Bubbins on recently. He was great. And I said, he would just be great on Would I Lie to You? And because that person's just been on House of Games, there's another box that's been ticked and they can immediately be booked on Would I Lie to You? And once you've been booked on Would I Lie to You, you can be booked on anything.
The flywheel effect.
8 out of 10 Cats, which we made for years, we would have tryouts all the time with incredibly new comics who've never been on anything, and then you'd give them their first chance on telly. And once they've had their first chance on telly, the ones who are going to make it absolutely make it, and then make it very, very quickly. So, there are certain nursery slopes where you can turn someone from an unknown into a celebrity. To speak to the question, to go immediately to national treasure status, the last two people I can remember that went from 0 to national treasure immediately, very different ends of the age range. They would be Luke Littler, the 17-year-old darts player, and Captain Tom. Both of those two came straight out the traps. They didn't waste time with sort of mini fame. They immediately became massive, and they both would have been welcome on House of Games at different times. But I think you can absolutely burst onto the scene and be huge immediately. By the way, this is a subset of celebrities, but all of the gladiators are instantly celebrities now. All of them, they instantly all become celebrities. And if you have Nitro on House of Games, everyone's like, I know exactly who that is. Okay, that's Nitro. That's a proper celebrity. And that sort of thing's a dream when suddenly someone gives you ready-made, 16 brand new celebrities that you can book on any show that you want. And believe you me, that's what we're doing.
Thank God we talked about gladiators, because I had realised we hadn't for a second this episode, so we have to cover it on absolutely every single thing.
Can you imagine a show without gladiators talk? Kieran Garland has a question. Marina, how significant are the recent tax cuts for the independent film industry?
They are very significant, actually. And we should say that so much stuff gets made in the UK. I was speaking to a big producer this week who was like, literally nothing is being made in LA. And she was slightly exaggerating for comic effect, but really so many things are being made in the UK. The studio I'm currently in at the moment, Leavesden, they made Wonka there, they made Barbie there. Shepperton has just announced it's become the biggest studio in Europe, and I think it's really second as a hub only to sort of Hollywood.
Yeah, Pinewood is expanding.
Pinewood is huge. Amazon and Netflix are in at Shepperton. Now, Hollywood studios can claim 25% tax relief on a production in the UK, and a lot of stuff is, as I say, a lot of stuff is made here. The recent budget have said 40% tax relief on movies under £15 million. So that's basically relatively small independent films. That is huge. It's a lot of money if you're involved in one of those films, and it's the difference between being able to make them and not. So that is actually rarely quite a good support for the creative industries from this particular government. They've also done some stuff for VFX, because what happens is a lot of stuff now has VFX post-production, and it tends to go to Canada, India, even France, I think, had better incentives. That was also addressed.
Even France?
Even France had better, yes, tax incentives, and high-end television tax relief is also very big. But what you have to understand about incentives, because you think, well, why should these things be incentivized? Film is such a difficult, and television, it's so difficult to get things made. They really chase the incentives. Around the US, part of the reason that people aren't making so many things in Hollywood is because certain states like Georgia made it hugely attractive to make their films there, and Marvel were effectively working out of Georgia. Then there are other states that, Cleveland, there's a lot of interviews you'll see about Cleveland where people will let you shut anything. They'll let you shut a freeway to downtown Cleveland for 2 weeks and say, yeah, no one really ever goes there anyway, or whatever. And they prostrate themselves before these industries in order to get them to come and bring their business there. So in order to be competitive in those things, you really have to offer a system of tax incentives. Somebody else, I think, a previous week, someone wrote in and asked and said, what are you supposed to do if they're going to close up all these tax loopholes? Well, first of all, if you want to give your money away tax-free and you're a funder of these sort of things, you can always sell your art to a museum or a gallery or something like that. But in general, I would say that you have to incentivize this business, and it's something that we do very well, and more things are being made here, and fewer things are being made in Los Angeles and places where you might expect them to be made. So that is definitely very significant for independent film, the thing that happened in the budget recently, and it's been really welcomed in the industry.
Yeah, pretty much any big project, because film especially and TV dramas are hugely expensive to make. And I've very rarely been involved in a project that didn't at some point go, we're 10% off what we need.
Yeah.
And actually the tax incentives can do that, and it keeps work in this country. It keeps work for all the different trades that work around drama and entertainment. It keeps that in this country. And I think it adds an enormous amount of money to the economy as well. We really are some of the very, very best in the world in the world of entertainment and in drama.
Yes, and as a form of soft power, it obviously has always made sense for the government to back these kind of industries, because there's a great reputation for them around the world. And things like the BBC, which is a separate thing to what we're talking about here, but that is a form of soft power, and it's sort of mad to constantly cut away at it because you're hobbling yourself where there's absolutely no need to. Richard, because you're recording House of Games at the moment, there is a very specific House of Games question that I feel I have to ask you on behalf of Robert Kirkwood. When Richard does the Haus der Spiele round in House of Games, does he get pronunciation help in his earpiece?
Okay, that's a round where all the questions are in foreign languages. So, there's questions in French and German, and you have to sort of try and work out, sometimes there's some proper nouns you can work out, and then you have to come up with the answer. I'm not a linguist. I will say that, but I try. I think my German is quite good. If I'm in Germany and I say Guten Tag, people think I'm German. It's the only country in the world where that happens. When I was in Italy recently doing a book thing, I sort of went on stage and I just went "Ciao ragazzo," and my translator translated that into Italian. I said, have you just translated my Italian into Italian? She went, yes, I'm sorry, I had to. So my accent is not the best, but Italian, this is such a great specific question. This must be the most boring question in the world for people who don't watch House of Games. Italian, French, German, Spanish, I will try and do myself. But we often have Swedish and Icelandic.
Oh my
and
God.
when we do Swedish and Icelandic, I have one of our lovely question writers, Tom Banks, in my ear. he will go through it phonetically. Now, I have no idea if Tom knows very much Swedish or Icelandic, but certainly I literally repeat exactly what Tom says.
But how does he go through it phonetically at the right speed? And how can you do it at the right speed and be having it fed into your ear?
It's just one of those things that you can. It's weirdly that you can do, and because you're speaking in a foreign language, the cadence is slightly different to one's normal cadence anyway. So, but yeah, you can. If I was talking
with
to you
your
in
lovely
your ear,
Icelandic accent, of course.
Exactly, it comes very naturally, and so yeah, the second after he said something, I say the same thing, and then I immediately apologise to the people of Iceland or Sweden afterwards. But
yes.
one day we'll do a huge dive into every round on House of Games and the various things we have to do. But that's the one. If people choose like the German category, I'm so happy. The second they choose something that I know is Icelandic, I'm like, oh no, here we go. Question from Katie here, who's been coy about her surname, or perhaps she doesn't have a surname. Perhaps like Madonna, she just goes by Katie. Why do superstar actors end up doing adverts for things like Money Supermarket, Warburton's or Asda? Is it simply for the money, or is it an equity thing and they need to work?
They are not required to keep their hours up, Katie. And if they lose them, then they're no longer counted as an actor. They do it for the money. Could be a divorce. Could just be because they like money.
Yeah, and it's and quite often they do adverts that are not shown in their own country. So, you know, Stallone will do Warburton's and it's just shown in the UK and like he cares and someone's just given him an absolute fortune. So, yeah, like so many things that so many actors do, that one's for the money. It's nice to have a question that's easy to answer for once.
Yes, that was a very good one, Katie. But yes, always
Actors
for the money.
love money.
And on that note, I think we better say farewell for another week.
Yeah, that was a fun one. And next week, I'm hoping I'm going to be, I shall be back with you. But
yes, thank goodness.
More and more questions. They're wonderful. Thank you so much. It's therestlessentertainment@gmail.com. And I'm sorry we can answer so few, but we enjoy answering the ones we do.
Richard, I will see you next week for the main edition of the show and some questions as well, of course.
I will see you in person.
Yeah, thank goodness. All right, then.
See you all next week. Bye.
Bye-bye.